Hi, Eileen Dillon, MSW here again, talking with you about Earth Giant School, coronavirus, learning lessons, and emotional mastery. Well, the last time I spoke with you, I asked you to consider giving some thought to responsibility. What does responsibility mean to you? How willing are you to take responsibility? And what things you might not want to take responsibility for? And I hope you've had a chance to look into that because it turns out responsibility is very important in human life. Now, I want to acknowledge that for many, many people, responsibility has come to feel like a burden, and that usually started in our teen years when parents started saying things like, when are you going to be responsible? And you weren't being responsible. So it felt like it was a burden. In actual fact, responsibility and taking responsibility is what gives us the opportunity to be at choice. Responsibility is also one of the four main building blocks of self esteem. In the early 1990s, I wrote a series of workbooks for parents, helping them to teach their children about how to work with emotions. And one of the resources I consulted was concept synergy. That's where I learned about 7 building blocks of self esteem. And I practiced those 7 building blocks. And I'm here to tell you that my very early life was full of a lot of pain and difficulty, and my self esteem was on the floor for a very long portion of my early life. And these 7 building blocks, when I began practicing them in my own life, have allowed me to raise my self esteem, and it also stays there without me having to renew it or re up on the self esteem. So, let me tell you the 4 main building blocks: they're honesty, responsibility, spontaneity, and integrity. Honesty, we can talk about honesty with others, but more important is honesty with yourself, facing fact, looking at things squarely for what is true for you and how you see things and what's important to you. Responsibility is about realizing that each one of us is responsible for our own life. We co-create the life that we live, and we do this by what do we pay attention to, what do we focus on, how much love do we give ourselves, what kind of interaction do we have with others, how do we treat other people, how do we treat ourselves, etc., etc. Our world reflects all of that back to us. So we end up co creating. The energy of responsibility helps us to co create the life that we live. Spontaneity is about listening to what's in our heart, what's important to us, and following it. If indeed we came here to learn on the earth, then it's really important that we explore who we are and what is possible for us and what we can do here and what we can do for others. And that's what spontaneity is all about. Integrity to me is about living according to our own ideals and principles. And when we do that, well, let me give you a little story. I live full time in my RV. I've traveled for the last 3 years. And about a year and a half ago, I was in Arizona, went to a grocery store, and I like to make my morning tea with spring water. So I bought 3 containers of spring water and put them on the bottom of my basket. Well, as I was checking out, I was really enjoying talking with the checker, and I forgot to mention that those bottles were on the bottom of my cart, and the checker didn't look. So I'm all the way out. I park way out so that my van has room. I park out in the parking lot, and it was hot, and I'm pushing my cart, And I get almost to the van and realize that I haven't paid for those 3 bottles of water. Now, they're not really expensive. And so the first thought I had was, I don't really want to go back. It's not very much. They won't miss it. And who's going to notice? And that's when the responsibility bug came up in me and the integrity bug. I said, I will notice because I live on the basis of principle. And if I don't go and pay for what I have picked up at a store where that's the deal, you pay for what you get there, then I'm going to have a hard time living with myself. So I turned my cart around and I went back into the grocery store and went to the same checker and pointed out to him that I hadn't paid. The woman he was taking care of at that moment turned to me and said, "Oh, that's so wonderful that you did that." And I said, "No, it's not wonderful at all. I just realized I didn't really want to do this, but I realized that I would have a hard time living with myself if I didn't come back and take responsibility and act with integrity." And she said, "I know what you mean." So integrity is, what your values are, what's important to you, and you live according to those principles. And that's the integrity. So honesty, responsibility, spontaneity, and integrity. Those can start your life, yourself, and your self-esteem rising right away. So we co-create our lives. Whose idea is that? It's hard to believe, but when you realize that we're in a giant school and that things are set up in a way that we are given experiences which contain lessons, and then we have the tools, emotions, to help us figure them out, then it begins to make a little more sense. And let me tell you something else. Once the possibility of you learning a lesson has been offered to you, that lesson doesn't go away. It may seem like it does, but what it does is it sort of circles around and comes back and pretty much hits you over the back of the head. In fact, you can refuse to learn a lesson over and over and over again. But what I've discovered is that each time it goes around like that and comes back, it's a harsher lesson. And that is Mother Nature's way of prodding us to learn what has come up inside of us. These lessons come up inside of us. They're our lessons, they're tailor made for us. And so it just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing till we go, oh, all right. Now, human beings don't like to change. And what I've discovered as a therapist is that most people will not change until the pain of where they are is so great, they think it couldn't be any worse if they made the change. And that leaves quite a bit of space for suffering because the universe, Mother Nature, is pushing on us, saying, okay, here's a lesson to learn, here's a lesson to learn, here it comes again, here's a lesson to learn. And each time it's a harder knock, it's a more painful experience. And so that's taking up our time and it's causing us to suffer. And it just keeps going, getting harsher and harsher. However, here's the good news. As soon as you turn around and say, okay, I'm going to learn this lesson, and you learn it, you're finished. It's all over. You don't have the suffering, you don't have the pounding. That lesson is finished. And you get a little free time, and then another lesson will come. And even more importantly, is when you realize that you're in a school and every time something comes up, it is an opportunity to learn, and you go, oh, wow, I have a chance to learn something and I'm going to learn this right away, then you don't suffer nearly as much anymore. And that's a really important thing to know, that you can actually curtail the suffering in your life by accepting that you're in school There are things to learn, and you can take responsibility for doing that learning. And there are things called emotions that can help you with that. And people like me who are interested in helping you too, because I'm so grateful that I've been able to learn these things and put them to use in my life, because my life is about 50,000 times better than it was 50 years ago. And I want that for you too. I'm Eileen Dillon, MSW. Until next time.